Arrest her. She doesn't belong here. The scream came from Karen Douglas, her voice sharp as glass, cutting through the peaceful hum of Maple Grove's quiet afternoon. In her hand, she waved her phone like a weapon. Behind her, 3 squad cars pulled up, sirens wailing, lights flashing red and blue across manicured lawns and white picket fences. And at the center of this storm, a trembling little girl. 7-year-old Lily Brown sat frozen on her small pink bicycle, clutching a faded stuffed unicorn to her chest. Her sneakers, glittery with cartoon stars, dangled inches above the pavement. Around her, 3 uniformed officers stepped in close, their heavy boots echoing against the concrete. Their eyes carried suspicion, not compassion. Lily's lips trembled, and through her sobs she whispered words that would haunt everyone who heard them. "I want my mommy." The crowd of neighbors gasped. What had begun as a sunny suburban day was unraveling into every parent's nightmare. And here's the truth. What triggered this was not a crime, not mischief, not anything that deserved flashing lights and armed officers. What started it was something pure, innocent, and heartbreakingly childlike. If you believe children deserve safety and dignity, hit subscribe to Heart and Mind and type justice in the comments. We read them, and your words matter. Because once you hear how this day began, just 45 minutes earlier, you'll understand how easily prejudice twists the ordinary into disaster. 45 minutes before the sirens, before the crowd, before Karen's triumphant shriek, Lily Brown was just another little girl trying to make sense of her new neighborhood. She had woken up that morning buzzing with nerves. It was her very first day at Maple Grove Elementary. At 7 years old, Lily was smaller than most of her classmates, with wide brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She chose her favorite purple dress, the one with tiny sequin butterflies stitched along the hem, and her sparkly sneakers that lit up when she walked. Her most important accessory, though, wasn't clothes. It was Star, the stuffed unicorn she carried everywhere. Star had been a gift from her father before his final military deployment overseas, the deployment he never returned from. For Lily, Star was more than fabric and stuffing. It was memory, protection, and love she could hold in her arms. That morning, her mother, Angela Brown, knelt in front of her before they left for school. Angela, 38 years old, wore her uniform crisp and spotless. As the newly appointed chief of police for Riverside County, she was one of only a handful of black women in the state to ever hold such a position. But none of her medals, her rank, or her authority mattered to Lily. She only cared that Angela kissed her forehead and promised, "I'll pick you up this afternoon. Be brave, my scientist princess." Lily giggled at the title. She'd been telling everyone she wanted to be a princess scientist, someone who wore crowns while discovering new planets, preferably planets where butterflies lived. Angela walked her daughter into the bright red brick school, exchanged a smile with Ms. Carter, Lily's teacher, and then left for a council meeting that promised to be the most important of her career. She could never have guessed that while she debated policy reforms to protect children from bias and harm, her own child would be the one needing protection. School went better than Lily expected. She met a girl named Emma who also loved butterflies, and at recess they chased them across the playground until their lungs ached from laughter. By dismissal, Lily was glowing with happiness. Angela had told her she could ride her bicycle around the block as long as she stayed close. So when the school bus dropped her off, Lily strapped on her little backpack, filled with crayons, a lunchbox, and the magnifying glass Ms. Carter gave her as a welcome gift, and pedaled slowly down Maple Street. The neighborhood was like something out of a glossy magazine. Wide lawns, trimmed hedges, SUVs parked neatly in driveways. Houses here cost more than Angela had ever dreamed she'd afford. She had chosen Maple Grove for its schools, its safety, and the chance to give Lily what she never had. Lily didn't see luxury. She saw adventure. She pedaled toward the cluster of community mailboxes at the end of the street when something glittering caught her eye. Nestled in the mulch near a post was a smooth, shiny rock that sparkled like diamonds in the sun. Her breath caught in excitement. Daddy's voice came rushing back from memory. Every rock has a story. Lily, if you look closely enough, you'll find treasure. She hopped off her bike, dug carefully with her little fingers, and pulled out the rock. It was cold and beautiful in her palm. She lifted her new magnifying glass to her eye, peering at the tiny crystals. She giggled in wonder. For Lily, this was discovery. This was magic. This was Daddy keeping his promise that treasures lived in unexpected places. What she didn't notice, couldn't notice, was the shadow moving behind the blinds across the street. For the past 2 weeks, Karen Douglas had been watching the Browns with a bitterness that grew sharper each day. At 45, Karen's life had crumbled. Her husband had left her for a younger woman. Her career at the bank ended in budget cuts. She had lost her house, her friends, her confidence. All that remained was this small property she inherited from her mother, and the one thing she clung to fiercely: control. Control over who belonged in Maple Grove. When Angela and Lily moved in, Karen's resentment ignited. A black woman leading the county's police force, a child running freely on the street. It was change, and change terrified her. She logged their comings and goings. She wrote down car license plates. She convinced herself she was protecting the neighborhood. But beneath it all, prejudice and loneliness festered. So when she saw Lily kneeling by the mailboxes with a magnifying glass, her suspicion snapped into certainty. To Karen, the innocent magnifying glass became criminal equipment. The little girl's rock hunt became tampering with mail. She stormed out of her house, her jaw tight, her phone clutched like a badge. "What are you doing?" she barked, marching across the street. "Digging around our mailboxes?" Lily startled, but her first instinct was to share. She held up the sparkling rock with a grin. "Look what I found. My daddy said every rock has a story if you look close." Her words dripped with joy, with innocence. Karen saw none of it. She snatched the rock from Lily's hand. "You don't belong here," Karen snapped. "Where are your parents? What are you really doing?" Lily's smile collapsed. Confused tears welled in her eyes. "That's my treasure," she whispered. "I found it fair and square." Karen's voice hardened. "I don't care what your daddy taught you. This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't have children snooping around like criminals." Lily tried to explain. "I live here, at 412 Maple." She faltered. Her real address was 421. Nervous and frightened, she mixed up the numbers. Karen seized on it. "See? You can't even give your address. You're lying." Lily's tears spilled over. She clutched Star, trembling, and Karen pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting suspicious activity," she announced, pointing the lens straight at the child. Lily panicked. She tried to pedal away, her little legs pumping hard, but Karen's angry voice followed. "You're not going anywhere until we find out the truth." In her desperation, Lily lost control of the bicycle. Her backpack bounced, the magnifying glass tumbled out, and it shattered on the pavement. Lily froze. She bent down, sobbing, trying to pick up the shards. "I'm sorry, I'll clean it. Please don't be mad." Karen's voice rose like a siren of its own. "Now you're destroying property. First mailboxes, then lies. Now littering. You're nothing but trouble." Neighbors began to look on. Mrs. Lee, watering her flowers, frowned at the sight of an adult towering over a crying child. Mr. Alvarez, resting from yard work, started walking closer, but Karen waved them off, drunk on her own authority. "I have this under control," she declared. "This child is suspicious. She doesn't belong here." Lily's cries turned into hiccuping sobs. Her little hands shook as she whispered to her stuffed unicorn, "I just want Mommy. Please, Mommy." And then Karen did the one thing that turned a cruel encounter into a nightmare. She dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" Karen's voice shifted instantly. sweet with fake concern. Yes, I need to report a suspicious black child casing houses in Maple Grove. She's been tampering with mailboxes using some kind of device. Acting erratic, possibly abandoned. We need officers immediately. As she spoke, she glanced down at the sobbing 7-year-old who had done nothing but pick up a rock, and she smiled, because she knew exactly what her words would unleash. The sirens in the distance began to wail. Lily's heart dropped. In her 7-year-old mind, sirens meant bad people. If the police were coming, that meant she must be bad. "I'm not bad," she whispered, pressing Star against her wet cheeks. "I just found a pretty rock." "Mrs." Lee dropped her watering can and rushed forward, her voice gentle, trembling with compassion. "Little one, you okay? Don't cry." But it was too late. The disaster was already set in motion. 3 squad cars roared into Maple Grove, lights flashing across perfect lawns, and as officers stepped out, Karen Douglas straightened her shoulders, ready to sell her lie. What happened next would shock the entire neighborhood and change their community forever. The flashing lights bounced off the polished windows of Maple Grove, painting every house in pulsing red and blue. 3 squad cars lined the curb, their engines rumbling, their radios crackling, doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. Sergeant Harris, a 15-year veteran with calm eyes and a stiff posture, took the lead. Beside him was Officer Blake, tall, broad, his jaw set hard, a man who prided himself on being tough on crime. And trailing just behind them, trying to mask her nerves, was Officer Daniels, fresh out of the academy, her training still crisp in her mind. The 3 of them advanced toward the trembling child behind the tree. "Are you the caller?" Harris asked sharply. Karen Douglas stepped forward, her voice dripping with self-importance. She pointed to Lily, who clutched her stuffed unicorn like a shield. "Yes, I'm the one. That child has been acting suspiciously for almost an hour. She's been tampering with our mailboxes, lying about where she lives and destroying property. I feared she was casing the neighborhood." Officer Blake's eyes narrowed. He saw only a frightened little girl, but dispatch had reported juvenile tampering with mailboxes, erratic behavior. Protocol demanded seriousness. Meanwhile, Lily tried to make herself small. Her purple dress was dirty at the knees from kneeling in mulch, her sneakers scuffed, her face streaked with tears. She whispered, barely audible, "I want Mommy. Please, I want Mommy." Mrs. Lee, standing a few feet away, called out softly, "Officers, she's just a child. She was looking at rocks, that's all." Karen whipped around, her glare silencing the older woman. "Don't interfere. Mrs. Lee, you didn't see everything. You don't understand the danger." Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat, gathering courage. "I did see. I was watching from my yard. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just playing." But Karen cut him off, her voice loud, commanding. "You people don't get it. I've lived here for years. I know what belongs here and what doesn't. This isn't just play, it's suspicious behavior, and you're naive if you can't see it." Her word, cold and precise, carried weight. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Sergeant Harris crouched slightly, trying to soften his tone. "Little girl, what's your name?" Lily's sobs broke into hiccups. "Lily. And where do you live?" "Lily?" he asked, notebook in hand. Her hands shook as she pointed vaguely toward the row of houses. I live there. At 412. No, 421. I think." Her voice trailed off into confusion. Karen's lips curved into a satisfied smirk. "See? She can't even give a straight answer," Officer Blake muttered. "That's suspicious." But Officer Daniel's eyes lingered on the child. She didn't see deception, only terror. Her gut told her something was wrong about this entire scene. "Sergeant," Daniel spoke carefully, "maybe we should de-escalate. She looks terrified. This doesn't feel like protocol first, Harris interrupted. We need clarity before making assumptions. To Lily, those words didn't sound professional. They sounded like doom. She clutched her unicorn tighter, whispering into its worn fur. I wasn't bad, Star. I wasn't bad. The crowd was growing. Curious neighbors stepped onto porches, murmuring, pulling out phones. A jogger slowed to record. Children peeked from behind parents' legs. The scene, a sobbing 7-year-old boxed in by 3 officers, looked less like protection and more like intimidation. Officers, Karen pressed. She had some kind of device, a tool for tampering. She smashed it on the ground when I confronted her. She pointed dramatically to the shards of the magnifying glass still glittering on the pavement. That's evidence, Blake said immediately, jotting notes. Mrs. Lee stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. No, that was a school gift, a magnifying glass. She was looking at rocks. Blake shot her a look. Ma'am, please step back. But Daniel's voice broke in again. She's telling the truth. That looks like a child's magnifying glass, not burglary tools. Karen's face flushed. She turned her anger on Daniel's. You're too young to know what you're dealing with. I've lived here long enough to recognize trouble. Meanwhile, Lily's small hand fumbled at her wrist. She remembered the smartwatch Mommy had given her, for emergencies only. Through blurry tears, she pressed the screen, whispering, Mommy, please come. The scary lady called the police. I didn't do anything bad. Please. But her trembling fingers missed the right button. The call didn't go through. Her desperate whispers went nowhere. Sirens had stopped, but to Lily, the nightmare was only beginning. She glanced at the officers, towering, armed, questioning, and then at Karen, whose crossed arms radiated triumph. The world felt hostile, unsafe. Her sobs grew louder. I want Mommy. Please, I want Mommy. The plea cut through the crowd, silencing whispers. Even Sergeant Harris paused, his pen hovering. Officer Daniels felt her chest tighten, and for a moment, even Officer Blake looked uneasy. But Karen's voice slashed the silence. Don't be fooled by tears. That's manipulation. She doesn't belong here. The words hardened the air, and just then, as if fate itself had orchestrated the timing, a car screeched around the corner. Angela Brown's car. Inside, Angela's pulse pounded. She had just left City Hall, phone buzzing with 12 missed calls, the dispatch alert replaying in her head. Suspicious juvenile at 421 Maple Street. 421 Maple Street, her home. She braked hard, eyes widening at the scene before her. 3 patrol cars, a crowd of neighbors. Her daughter huddled on the ground. Her worst fear, the one that haunted her in every quiet moment, had arrived on her own street. Angela threw open the door and ran. Lily! Her daughter's head snapped up. Through her tears, she saw the one face she had prayed for. Mommy, she wailed, sprinting toward Angela. She crashed into her mother's arms, sobbing. I wasn't bad. I just found a rock. I wasn't bad. Angela cradled her tight, her jaw clenched, her eyes blazing. The officers froze. They had no idea this child, this suspicious juvenile, was the daughter of their chief, and the reckoning was only beginning. The moment Angela Brown's arms wrapped around her daughter, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. The police chief, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in Riverside County, was cradling a 7-year-old child who had just been surrounded by her own officers. Officers! Angela's voice cut sharp as steel, though she kept her tone low for Lily's sake. You have 30 seconds to explain why my daughter was treated like a criminal in her own neighborhood. Shuritu Sergeant Harris stiffened. He had spent years commanding tense scenes, but this was different. This was his boss. His mind raced for words, but before he could answer, Karen Douglas jumped in, her voice high, brittle with panic. I didn't know she was your kid. I thought she was casing the neighborhood. She lied about her address. She was tampering with mailboxes, and she destroyed property. I was only protecting us. Angela's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. You called in an emergency response for a child with a stuffed animal and a school magnifying glass? And you lied to make her sound dangerous? Karen faltered, her voice shrinking. She looked suspicious. The crowd began murmuring. Even those who had hesitated before now shifted uneasily. Mr. Alvarez stepped forward. Chief Brown, I saw everything. Your daughter wasn't doing anything wrong. She found a shiny rock. That's all. Ms. Douglas twisted it into something ugly. Mrs. Lee nodded, holding up the broken glass in her trembling hands. She used this. Teacher gave it. Not dangerous. Only science. Angela took the shards gently, her expression tightening. She turned them in her palm, the fragments catching red and blue flashes from the squad lights. The symbol was unmistakable, curiosity shattered by suspicion. Sergeant Harris cleared his throat. Chief, we responded to the 911 report. Protocol required. Stop! Angela's voice sliced clean through his sentence. Don't recite protocol. Tell me what you saw, with your own eyes. Harris faltered. He had seen a crying little girl clutching a unicorn. He had seen innocence, not threat, but he hadn't trusted himself. Officer Blake stepped in, his tone defensive. Ma'am, with respect, appearances can be deceiving. We've all seen criminals who... Criminals! Angela's voice rose, her fury controlled, but unmistakable. She is 7 years old. You looked at a terrified child and chose to treat her as a suspect? Officer Daniels, the rookie, finally found her voice. She stepped forward, her face pale, eyes wet. Chief, she's right. I knew this didn't feel right. But I didn't speak up. I should have. Angela studied the young officer. Her anger softened slightly, though only for a moment. Then trust your instincts when compassion tells you something's wrong. Karen's voice shrieked again, desperate to salvage her crumbling authority. You're all being manipulated by a child's tears. I've lived here for 20 years. I know what belongs and what doesn't. That family doesn't belong. Her words sliced the crowd like poison. People gasped. A mother pulled her child closer, and for the first time, the veil dropped. Karen wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was protecting her prejudice. Angela rose to her full height, still holding Lily on her hip. Her voice was low, dangerous. Say it clearly. Ms. Douglas, you didn't call because you saw danger. You called because you saw skin color. Karen's face went red. That's not... She sputtered, cornered, but the neighbors had already judged. The disgust in their eyes spoke louder than her excuses. The crowd pressed closer. Phones recorded every word. This was no longer a neighborhood drama. It was a public reckoning. Angela turned back to her officers. You let one caller's prejudice override your own judgment. You traumatized a child, my child, because you couldn't see past someone else's fear. Her words hung heavy in the night air. Even Blake, defiant minutes ago, shifted uncomfortably, guilt creeping across his stern features. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve, her voice small. Mommy, I still have my rock. She opened her tiny palm, revealing the shiny treasure she had kept clenched tight through her tears. Angela's voice cracked for the first time that day. Oh, sweetheart, Daddy would be proud. The image was undeniable, a child holding a rock. Not a weapon, a symbol of curiosity, not crime. And the entire neighborhood saw it. Karen tried one last time, her voice shrill. You're all blind. I was protecting Maple Grove. Someone had to do it. Angela faced her squarely. No, you weren't protecting. You were weaponizing fear. And tonight, everyone here saw exactly what that looks like. The crowd's silence turned heavy. Karen stood alone. Angela's next words were not shouted. They didn't need to be. This ends now. There will be accountability for the lies, for the trauma, and for every officer who forgot their duty to protect first. Her promise was clear. And in that moment, Maple Grove realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was only shifting. From prejudice unchecked to justice demanded. The night air in Maple Grove felt different now. Heavier, electric, like a storm had rolled in without warning. Neighbors who had once waved politely across fences stood shoulder to shoulder, silent witnesses to something bigger than one child's tears. The hum of squad radios still lingered, but all eyes were on Angela Brown, holding her daughter tight, staring down her own officers and the neighbor who had started it all. Angela's voice, low but resonant, carried across the crowd. What happened here tonight will not be forgotten, not by me, not by my daughter, and not by this community. The words landed like a verdict. Karen Douglas shifted nervously, her arms folded tight across her chest as if that could shield her from the gazes burning holes through her. For years, she had played self-appointed watchdog of Maple Grove, convinced she alone stood between order and chaos. But now her kingdom was gone. The neighbors she claimed to protect looked at her, not with gratitude but with disgust. "I only wanted to protect us," Karen stammered. Anyone would have thought it was suspicious. "No," Angela cut her off, each syllable sharp. "Anyone with sense would have seen a child playing with a rock. You didn't call the police because of what Lily did. You called because of what she looks like." A ripple moved through the crowd. People nodded. Some muttered under their breath. Mrs. Lee spoke softly but firmly. "Yes, that is truth." Karen's mouth opened, then shut again. Her excuses crumbled in the open air. Angela shifted Lily gently into her arms and faced her officers. "Sergeant Harris, Officer Blake, Officer Daniels, you came here prepared for a threat. Instead, you found a 7-year-old sobbing with a toy, and you still chose to treat her as a suspect." Harris swallowed hard. "Chief, Angela raised a hand. "Not now. You'll give me full reports. Every decision, every word, every moment you ignored what was right in front of you. And then we'll decide what consequences follow." The weight in her tone made all three stand straighter. They weren't just officers now. They were defendants before their own commander. Officer Daniels' face was stricken, her voice trembling. "Chief, I wanted to say something. I knew it was wrong, but I froze. I let protocol silence me. I'm sorry." Angela's expression softened just slightly. "Then remember this moment. The day you let fear of speaking up nearly break a child. Carry it with you, and never let it happen again." Karen bristled, desperate to reclaim control. "You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't know she was your daughter. If I had..." Angela's eyes flashed. "It doesn't matter whose daughter she is. Would you have cared if she belonged to a single mother who wasn't chief of police? Would you have cared if no one came running?" The silence that followed was brutal. Karen's face paled. For the first time, she seemed to realize this wasn't just a spat between neighbors. This was her unmasking. The crowd pressed closer. Mr. Alvarez lifted his phone high, recording everything. "People need to see this," he murmured. And he was right. Videos had already begun streaming onto social media. Captions appearing, "Maple Grove woman calls cops on child. Police surround 7-year-old. The story was out. Angela, aware of every lens, every eye, chose her words carefully. "Tonight, my daughter's innocence was shattered, and all of you saw how quickly prejudice can turn safety into terror. This cannot stand." She turned back to Karen. "You filed a false report. You lied to 911 to weaponize my officers against a child. That is a crime, and tomorrow morning, I will make sure charges are filed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's knees nearly buckled. "You can't do that." "I can," Angela said flatly. "And I will." Lily stirred in her arms, her small voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Mommy, I still didn't do anything wrong, right?" Angela kissed her hair. "No, Baby, you did everything right. You found treasure. You remembered Daddy's lessons. That's all. The neighbors watching, mothers, fathers, grandparents, felt a pang deep inside. It was impossible not to see the cruelty of what had been done to her. Mrs. Lee stepped forward and pressed something into Angela's free hand. The shards of the broken magnifying glass, carefully gathered. For her, she said, so she know not everyone blind. Angela's throat tightened. She nodded her thanks, eyes glistening. The officers stood frozen, unsure what to do next. Harris finally spoke. Chief, do you want us to clear the scene? Angela took a long breath. Yes, dismiss the units. There's no threat here. There never was. The order was heavy with irony. One by one, squad cars rolled away, their lights fading down Maple Street. What remained was the echo of sirens and the memory of what they had meant. Karen lingered, her face twisting between defiance and fear. She tried once more, her voice breaking. This neighborhood will regret letting things slide. You'll see. But no one followed her. No one defended her. The people she once cowed into silence turned their backs. Mr. Alvarez said it plainly. The only thing we regret is not speaking up sooner. Karen's shoulders slumped. For the first time in years, she looked small, alone. Angela adjusted Lily on her hip, scanning the crowd. What happened here tonight is not just about my family. It's about all of us, about the kind of community we want to be. Do we want to let fear and prejudice define us? Or do we want to protect our children, all of them, with the love and dignity they deserve? No one answered at first, but then Mrs. Lee whispered, protect children. Others nodded. A few voices murmured agreement. The tide had turned. Angela's voice carried finality. Change starts now, in my department, and in this neighborhood. No more silence. No more looking away. Her words were not just a promise. They were a warning. And as she carried Lily back toward their home, neighbors stepped aside, clearing her path. Each of them left to wrestle with what they had just seen and what role they would play the next time prejudice came knocking. The storm had broken, but the rebuilding had only just begun. Morning came to Maple Grove with an uneasy quiet. The manicured lawns glistened with dew, but conversations at doorsteps and text chains between neighbors told the real story. What had happened the night before was no longer a private embarrassment. It was a reckoning rippling through every corner of the community. Videos of the scene, a sobbing little girl surrounded by officers, clutching her stuffed unicorn, had already gone viral. Captions spread across social feeds. 7-year-old terrorized in her own neighborhood. Police chief's daughter targeted by racial bias. Neighbor weaponizes 911. The images were undeniable. And at the center of it all was Lily Brown, a child who wanted nothing more than to collect pretty rocks like her daddy had taught her. Angela Brown sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cold, her mind razor sharp. She had been up all night drafting immediate reforms. What happened outside her house wasn't going to vanish into whispers. It was going to transform the way her department worked. Lily padded into the room in her pajamas, her unicorn clutched tight. Mommy, do I still have to go to school today? She asked timidly. Angela pulled her daughter onto her lap, brushing back her curls. Not today, baby. Today we rest. But soon, yes. Because you belong in that school, in this neighborhood, everywhere. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the shiny rock she had fought so hard to keep. She held it up to the light. It still sparkles, she whispered. Angela's throat tightened. That rock was more than a treasure now. It was proof that innocence, no matter how battered, could endure. By noon, the official statement went out. Karen Douglas had been charged with filing a false police report. The penalty was minor compared to the trauma she caused, but the social consequences were far harsher. The Homeowners Association voted unanimously to remove her from any community role. Parents who once tolerated her intrusions now avoided her completely. At the grocery store, conversations stopped when she walked in. At church, pews shifted away. Her reputation, once that of a self-styled guardian, had collapsed into isolation. Karen had wanted control. Instead, she was left with silence. Meanwhile, Angela gathered her officers at headquarters. Lily sat in her office coloring quietly. Star perched beside her. While the adults filed in, Angela stood at the front. No uniform today, just conviction. What happened last night is everything I've been fighting against. A child's innocence was stolen because we let one person's prejudice dictate our response. That ends now. She laid out sweeping reforms, mandatory retraining on recognizing racially biased calls, protocols for de-escalation, especially involving juveniles. Community forums where residents could learn the proper use of 911 and the damage caused by false reports. Every officer in this department will learn from this, Angela said firmly. No child should ever face what my daughter faced. Not in this county, not anywhere. Some officers shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded with determination. But all of them knew the culture was about to change. Back in Maple Grove, neighbors began to reckon with their own silence. Mrs. Lee arrived at the Browns' doorstep that evening with a gift bag. Inside was a brand new magnifying glass. "For little scientist," she said, smiling gently at Lily. "Keep exploring. Don't stop." Lily's face lit up. "Thank you." She ran to the yard, kneeling in the grass to examine a pebble, her giggles returning. Mr. Alvarez went further. He called for a neighborhood meeting in the community center. Dozens attended. "We can't let fear define us anymore," he told them. "We need to protect each other's children, not target them." For the first time, families spoke openly about prejudice, about the shame of staying silent. Plans formed. Block parties, play dates, watch groups focused not on exclusion, but on care. The neighborhood that once prided itself on perfection began learning what real community meant. 3 months later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, the Browns' front yard was alive with laughter. A blanket was spread with dozens of colorful rocks, each one a gift from children up and down the block. Lily, with her new magnifying glass, showed her friends Emma, Marcus, and Sophia the tiny crystals hidden in each stone. "See? Every rock has a story," she explained, repeating her daddy's words. Angela watched from the porch, coffee warm in her hands this time, pride swelling in her chest. Lily had not only survived the ordeal, she had transformed it. Her resilience had turned a wound into a seed for change. Now, instead of isolation, she was surrounded by friends. Instead of suspicion, she inspired curiosity. Her rock collection had become a symbol of innocence the whole neighborhood chose to protect. Angela whispered a promise to the sky, to the man she had lost. "She's safe, Michael. She's safe, and she's strong, and I'll keep fighting to make this world better for her." The story that began with sirens and tears had grown into something far more powerful. A community awakened, a department reformed, a mother's fury reshaped into lasting change, and at the center, a little girl who refused to let prejudice steal her wonder. The treasure Lily found that day wasn't just a sparkly rock. It was proof that when good people stand together, they can expose lies, protect innocence, and build a world where every child is free to explore with joy. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to Heart and Mind. These stories matter because they remind us that justice isn't abstract. It's how we treat the most vulnerable among us. Comment justice below, and we'll know you stand with us. The next story might just change the way you see your world.